thank you very much indeed for joining us here on the News Hour. This latest incident, does this just illustrate how vulnerable these people are and how unsuitable this camp is as a permanent solution for their long-term future?
It absolutely 100% does. What we're seeing is growing instability, growing vulnerability, and there are layers of instability and vulnerability. First of all, these people are under attack from the Tatmadaw, the Burmese army. They're terrified to go back to their homes, which is their right, because they would be persecuted. There was a genocide against them in 2017, which drove 750,000 Rohingyas into Bangladesh. But then there's also the political rivalry among the groups inside the camp. Dozens of people have been killed because of those rivalries. And the third level of vulnerability and fragility is about the gun running and the drugs and the illicit trades that are now going on in the camps. And that's because people are desperately poor. The World Food Programme has just announced it's going to reduce the amount of aid that each individual gets to $10 a month. That is wholly inadequate. And in that situation, we're going to see more instability, we're going to see more violence, and sadly, I fear we're going to see more of these arson attacks of the sort that we saw, which affected over 60,000 people. It's huge. It has to stop. It's perfectly obvious what the world has to do to bring these fragilities and vulnerabilities to an end, and we call on the world at the Myanmar Accountability Project to take that political and that humanitarian and that strategic and that diplomatic action. It's perfectly clear what has to be done. The Security Council is meeting today in New York. They know what they have to do. We need to see action. Time for talk is over.
Well, absolutely. And some accountability for what they've been through is absolutely their right to expect that. However, in terms of a more immediate solution to address their immediate needs, what can be done to give them some sort of safe housing and perhaps a place to call home?
Well, first of all, those who are homeless and were made homeless by the fire have got to be accommodated. The UN is there. Bangladesh is very sensitive because Bangladesh does not want to see this population become permanent. But there's a humanitarian imperative simply to make sure that children who need housing, who need medicine, who need clothing, that they have these things. The UN is there and can provide them, though, of course, the budgets are low, and we would call on the rich donor countries to make sure that the UN agencies operating in these camps and the international NGOs also have enough money for that. But I think the fundamental issue is what happens about returning them, because what mustn't happen is what happened to the Palestinians. I worked in Gaza, I worked in the occupied territories. Because of the appalling policies of the Israelis, these Palestinians were kept in camps. There was increased radicalization, increased vulnerability. There were huge explosions of violence every few years. We need to avoid that. So we need to have proper talks. We need to have a situation back home where these people can go back. Do not fear another genocide will be perpetrated against them. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in the immediate term. It's humanitarian. It's making sure they have food, they have medicine, they have shelter. In the longer term, the political aspects of the dispossession of the Rohingyas has to be addressed. And can I say that accountability is very much a part of that. The Myanmar Accountability Project has a case in Turkey. We presented a criminal file against 23 members of the Burmese junta, the Myanmar junta, to the chief prosecutor in Ankara, in Istanbul. The Justice Ministry in Ankara is investigating. We want to see action on that. We have to see action on that case. We want a case opened, because unless and until the Myanmar junta get the message that countries like Turkey are serious about accountability, these people are going to be left in the most appalling circumstances in these camps in Bangladesh. And that has to end. And Turkey must play a major role in accountability and in addressing that problem. These are fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. Turkey is a big player on the Islamic stage. We need to see action.
OK, Chris Gunness, thank you very much indeed. We appreciate you coming on the News Show. Good to speak to you today.
My pleasure, anytime.